Today we'll discuss a journey to the West, the fifth lecture on the flight of the Garuda. The fifth lecture was taught by His Holiness in the morning. In the afternoon there were other activities. I think it was blessings or something like that. The previous 2 days had teachings both morning and afternoon. Then on the morning of July 4th, His Holiness taught from the flight of the Garuda, starting with the verse, Emaho. Once again, noble children, listen well. In this way, when you have maintained the view without distraction, then later, even if you completely let go and leave things as they naturally are, there will be no coming or going from the true state. All the way to the final dedication prayer. By its virtue, may many fortunate disciples swiftly purify the stains of ignorance, kleshas, and concepts into the original space of primordial purity and attain fruition in this very life. Up to the final dedication verse. At the end, His Holiness said, Yesterday we received the oral transmission, which was very good, the Trekcho section. Actually, I had told Khenpo that in about 2 hours we should be able to complete both the Trekcho and Tagal transmissions. So when you made the request yesterday, it wouldn't have made sense to only request one, right? Both together would take about 40-something minutes. It would have been better to receive them all at once. But for my explanation, it might take over 2 hours. Perhaps you only chose one. Sometimes when you're listening, whether it's Khenpo's, Khenmos, or many others, no matter who's speaking, whether it's the manager or Khenpos and Khenmos, everyone under them either don't listen at all, as I've mentioned before, or if you do listen, make sure you catch every word from beginning to end. If you don't hear clearly, you just get a vague idea. Yesterday, I'm not sure if it was our side's issue. Maybe Khenpo only acknowledged one, but I think Khenpo would be willing to give any kind of transmission. So perhaps he was reluctant to skip the latter part. Could that be the case? Because in 2 hours, both Trekcho and Tagal should be completable. Our teaching sessions here are also basically 2 hours. Going a few minutes over wouldn't matter. I asked at the time whether we needed 3 hours. He said probably not. Around 2 hours would do. That's what he said. 2 hours. And the Tagal section is relatively shorter. I'm not saying your request was wrong. But among our Khenpos and Khenmos, there's also this tendency when someone is speaking, they seem to be in meditation, not taking notes, not recording the key points. Without recording, beings in this degenerate age have limited faculties after all. If you don't take notes when you give guidance in class the next day, I'm sure much of it will be incomplete. And what you did note down might be distorted, or you might have recorded something entirely different. It's possible. So from now on, whether it's our Dharma friends or when Khenpos and Khenmos are teaching, you should try your best to, as we often say, a good memory is no match for a worn-out pen. Did I say that right? Is that how it goes? A good memory is no match for a worn-out pen. I got it right the first time. So sometimes it's good to jot things down. I thought about this when His Holiness traveled abroad. Fortunately, I took some notes. Otherwise, being somewhat arrogant as I am, having frequent opportunities to be with His Holiness, many of these later memoirs would have been impossible to compile. So taking notes is probably just a habit. So yesterday, I felt it was a bit of a pity. It would have been better to complete both. His Holiness here only transmitted this one. At Rocky Mountain, His Holiness only transmitted the Trekcho section, but that was due to time constraints. When His Holiness was at the Academy, he had already taught both Trekcho and Tagal. I remember it was in 2019. We started on September 5th, 2019. It was about 13 lectures. We finished on October 25th. In 2019, we taught the flight of the Garuda over 13 lectures. At that time, we also only covered the Trekcho section. Actually, the Tagal section. If you have the transmission, it can be taught later. But anyway, it's fine. There will be opportunities in the future. So after His Holiness finished teaching, I also wanted to create an opportunity for you to complete the transmission right here. Now, this teaching of the flight of the Garuda, a song of the view on Dzogchen Trekcho, this flight of the Garuda, when His Holiness taught it before, we had a monk named Lama Gasa. He passed away long ago. He said, today His Holiness taught us the flight of the eagle. He confused Garuda with eagle. His Holiness taught the flight of the eagle. In Tibetan, the word for eagle is more like vulture. It's not the same thing. Eagle would still be a bit better. But vultures are the ones that eat corpses. He actually said shago, and shago means vulture, the flight of the vulture. His Holiness taught us the flight of the vulture. He was proudly telling others, His Holiness is teaching us the flight of the vulture. Today is the 5th lecture. I have spent more than 10 hours on this teaching. His Holiness sometimes, for them, time seemed to be, because they didn't need to follow city schedules. Going a bit longer was fine for them. Sometimes His Holiness would go a little over 2 hours. Otherwise, according to their schedule, 5 lectures should be completed within 10 hours. But since it was a retreat center, their schedule was a bit different, so each session ran slightly over time. The main purpose for me to teach you this text is to enhance your experience and realization of the nature of mind. They were already fairly accomplished practitioners, and by doing so I can purify the defilements of my speech. So whether we're giving guidance or sharing these teachings even just a little bit, in this lifetime for many of us, whether young or old, who knows if we'll have the chance to teach in the future, doing some guidance now, discussing with each other, this is also a wonderful way to purify the defilements of our speech. So I have explained every verse and sentence in the text without adding or reducing anything. Also, I have summarized and offered all the key points of this teaching to you in a condensed manner. So if necessary in the future, His Holiness's other commentaries should also be compiled. Would that be worthwhile? But I don't know if there will be opportunities. This text explains the clear light, great perfection, and also includes the key points of all other paths, like Mahamudra and the Great Middle Way. All the essential points. Here His Holiness brought up the Great Middle Way because he wanted to quote a teaching from the Karmapa. Generally speaking, of all the infinite doctrines taught by the Buddha, the ultimate essentials are encompassed in the 3 paths of the Great Middle Way, the Great Seal, and the Great Perfection. If you follow the path of the Great Middle Way in a complete and correct manner, the key points of the Great Seal and the Great Perfection will be implemented in your practice as well. Likewise, whether you practice Mahamudra or Dzogchen in a complete and authentic manner, the essentials of the other 2 paths will have been applied in your practice. Therefore, it is pivotal to practice Mahamudra, Dzogchen, and the Great Middle Way simultaneously. Many realized masters of Kagyu and Nyingma lineages, such as the 3rd Karmapa Rangjung Dorje and omniscient Longchenpa, engaged in their practices by following this method, including their lineages. Even now in Tibetan Buddhism, among all the schools, the Kagyu and Nyingma traditions share similar views and practices in many respects. The great masters of the past often spoke of this. When His Holiness went to Bhutan, he visited many Kagyu monasteries. When the masters came to meet him, they often discussed this. So much is indeed the same, and they place great emphasis on actual practice. They really value practice. We, teacher and disciples, should also combine the 3 paths into one in our daily study and practice. It is of great significance. How should you engage in such practice that combines the 3 paths as one, sustaining the state of calm abiding? The aspect of the mind that is free from any movement is Mahamudra. Here, Mahamudra and the Great Middle Way. On one hand, these are names of texts, but on the other hand, they describe our own states of realization. When your realization is within a focused state of mind, unwavering, this is actually, if someone asks you what Mahamudra is, this one sentence from His Holiness can serve as an answer. It's the simplest way to explain it. The mind cannot be found anywhere, either inside, outside, or in between. Such emptiness of the mind is the Great Middle Way. While abiding single-pointedly in emptiness, ascertain that the mind's nature is lucid, clear, pristine awareness. Gaining certainty in this is the great perfection. Originally, we obtained the audio recording of the live translation when His Holiness taught. After we got it, at first I thought I could put the Chinese and Tibetan side by side, translating into Tibetan. Since His Holiness spoke in Tibetan, the Tibetan would need to be transcribed sentence by sentence. After that, most of the live interpretation wasn't in Chinese, so I would need to translate sentence by sentence. As for the English, could we just use the original recording? That's what I thought at first. But when I compared them later, the differences were quite significant because live interpretation has its challenges. First, most of the live interpretation was done by Sangye Khandro. Sangye Khandro is the interpreter for many great masters of our time. She's very skilled and follows closely, but written translation and oral interpretation have different requirements, so in the end we had to redo all the English. Her oral interpretation was only used as a reference. Beyond that, everything was first translated from Tibetan to Chinese. Then the Chinese and Tibetan samples were compared, and then we proceeded to... So the other day when I said the English version was a bit slow, when I said that once actually they were referencing our work later on, and the materials they had on hand were only worked on after we finished our part. Later I realized they weren't slow at all. Their speed was actually quite fast. Generally speaking, this kind of pace isn't always achievable, so other languages are understandable too, including Japanese, French, and possibly many more languages in the future. This year, seeing these translators has been a wonderful connection. I'm very grateful to everyone. At first I thought the English might not need much work. We could just use the original directly, but there were many places where that just wasn't possible. So as we all know, for the commentary, the Tibetan had to be transcribed word by word without missing anything. Fortunately, His Holiness's audio was quite clear. Some of the audio I brought back myself, and some we obtained later. We pieced everything together. Actually, this took a very long time. Earlier, our Tibetan editing team transcribed some of His Holiness's audio into text. That took a very long time. Our Khenmos also typed up some initial drafts. Later, I personally listened repeatedly and revised everything again. So a tremendous amount of effort went into this. Last year, people said I got sick because I put in too much time and effort, so I fell ill. But if getting sick comes from working hard on His Holiness's teachings, I'd be happy about it. I'd have no regrets even if I died. But this version is quite reliable. We feel this is quite reliable. Now in the third Karmapa Rangjung Dorje's aspiration of the Mahamudra of definitive meaning, it says, "Didn't His Holiness want to quote this teaching? This absence of mental engagement is Mahamudra. The freedom from extremes is the great middle way. Since all is included here, this too is the great perfection. May I acquire the confidence of knowing one and realizing all." Here, Karmapa, he was from the Kagyu lineage. The Kagyu say that Mahamudra and the Great Middle Way are all encompassed in the Great Perfection. If we Nyingmapa said this ourselves, it might seem a bit, our teaching encompasses everything. That wouldn't be appropriate to say. But when Karmapa says it, Karmapa says, "Our Mahamudra and the Gelug's Great Middle Way can all be gathered within your Great Perfection. If you realize this, you've realized everything. If you realize the Great Perfection, then the Great Middle Way and Mahamudra become very easy." So, in His Holiness's direct introduction to the nature of mind, in the main practice section on primordial purity, he uses Mahamudra and the Great Middle Way in many ways to ascertain the emptiness of mind. In the commentary on direct introduction to the nature of mind, this section is explained in great detail. This citation means that being free from discernment and attachment, the wording is just slightly different. Here, being free from discernment is Mahamudra. Going beyond all extremes, the 4 extremes and 8 elaborations, this emptiness is the Great Middle Way. That which perfectly includes the essentials of all paths is the Great Perfection. Karmapa prayed for all sentient beings to realize this truth. That phrase, knowing one and realizing all. His Holiness explained it as a prayer for all beings to awaken in this way. That's how he explained it. Since I came to your center, I have been encouraging you again and again to practice the teachings of both Nyingma and Kagyu without any biased view or personal preference. You should make such an aspiration and try as much as possible to create favorable conditions to actualize these 2 paths. His Holiness said, "Thank you." Next is meeting the light. This older gentleman below, our conversation with him, the one with the beard below. This is from our interview with Joshua Mulder. He's still at the Great Stupa now. He lives there. He should be 71 years old now. In the photo below, when they were building the stupa, he had a fractured foot. So Kyabje Rinpoche was supporting him. Kyabje Rinpoche was supporting Mulder on one side and His Holiness on the other. On His Holiness's other side was Sakyong Mipham Rinpoche. He's the son of Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. I believe he was born in Tibet. Later, they all, if I remember correctly, Diana's book mentions this, they raised him together. When he went there originally, many of their centers, after Trungpa Rinpoche passed away, had pinned their hopes on him, but later there were some disagreements. Later, Trungpa Rinpoche's lineage, part of it is still under his management, while another part separated. That's the situation now. And later there were also some accusations, this and that. Actually, Westerners, on one hand, those who have faith are very stable. To this day, they still practice whatever teachings they originally received. But some others, due to conflicts of interest, emotional issues, this and that, have taken their teachers to court, creating quite a mess. So many teachers who at first thought the West was wonderful, people there had such good faith, now have some weariness toward them, because some, including Sogyal Rinpoche and other great masters, had individual disciples who were purely motivated by self-interest. A teacher is still a human being after all. If you look for faults in them, especially as a close disciple looking for flaws, especially with ulterior motives, you can certainly find them. So no matter where, when comparing this aspect, I feel perhaps because of the different depth of Buddhist culture, Tibetan areas are a bit better. In Tibetan areas at least, there may be some who break Samaya with their teacher. That kind of thing does exist, certainly. But to actually try to harm the teacher directly, to take them to court, up to now, I've never heard of such a thing. In the West, at the slightest provocation, it's this one did this, that one did that. So a group of Samaya breakers stir things up constantly. Even in our country now, some teachers, I've heard that some teachers from big centers feel that you might not like hearing this, but I think this way of labeling by teachers is inappropriate. They say Han Chinese are unreliable and things like that. But I think among Han Chinese there are very reliable people, though there may be a few unreliable ones. Actually, labeling an entire ethnicity this way is probably not right, but relatively speaking, perhaps in some places, the depth of Buddhist culture is quite thin. When it's thin like that, it's not in their entire upbringing. They haven't had this from childhood. Without this foundation, when there's a temporary teacher-student relationship, it can eventually devolve into conflicts of interest. This is indeed quite dangerous for the future. So for some Dharma teachers, when others make offerings and treat you especially well, you should tread carefully, as if walking on thin ice. Otherwise, someone who has a great relationship with you today, after some time, if they have some leverage against you, they might take you to court. Of course, going to court, or who knows who might end up in trouble. A while ago, there was that case with the rosewood furniture seller and that monk. Originally, he wanted to extort him, but in the end, both of them got into trouble. So it's hard to say who benefits in the end. But indeed, nowadays, many people have told me it's best not to give tantric teachings to many people. But I feel if I don't transmit the tantric teachings, many people won't have this opportunity. And you can't tell from here who has faith and who doesn't. Sometimes people you think are quite good might end up breaking Samaya. In my lifetime, there was one case before, more or less. This was basically kept confidential except for a very few people. But in the future, there might be one or two. Hard to say. If it happens, there's nothing to be done. If I don't transmit, they might find other ways anyway. So there's no way around it. It might happen. If it does, perhaps it would be better to leave before that. That way everyone's purity is maintained. Sometimes I have such thoughts. But regardless, whether you're a Dharma teacher, a monastic, or a lay practitioner, when dealing with others, including financial matters, you must think things through carefully first. Otherwise, today they say it's an offering, and after some time, this wasn't an offering, he took my money. Then you end up in a very awkward situation. How does it end? What happens in the end? Some of our Dharma teachers here have apparently had such situations before. Everyone should be aware of this. For all of these things, including keeping evidence for yourself, even if it's an offering, do it this way. If it's not an offering and you acquire it through other means, that's hard to say. So I often advise everyone not to get involved in financial matters unnecessarily. The same applies to other types of relationships. It's the same. But regardless, in the end, everyone might go down. At that point, who knows if there's any benefit. During His Holiness Jigme Phunsok's lifetime, there was basically one publicly known Samaya breaker. That old man still hasn't died. He's still around. He has a long life. At that time, the whole world knew about it. It's still that way now. I've mentioned this before. There was another one who was also ordained, except for a few of us nobody knows. Later, in his old age, he very much wanted to repent, but His Holiness wouldn't let him come, including his monastery. Even now, its relationship with the academy isn't great. Many people don't dare to go there, so this phenomenon of breaking Samaya, for Westerners, it doesn't mean much. If there are legal consequences, they're afraid, because it's breaking the law. But if you break Samaya or precepts in the Western mindset, it seems like something for the next life. And next life stuff doesn't feel very real to us. So perhaps some of us have this feeling too, because it seems like they place more emphasis on benefits in this life. Their reputation, their wealth, what they obtain, they care a lot about that. Judging from their actions regarding the next life, on the surface they seem to practice diligently, but they don't seem to care much about the next life. Such people do exist. So for many of us, including Dharma teachers, when you become well known, many people will treat you well. This is just how it works. But when you fall, this is called throwing stones at someone who's fallen into a well. When you've fallen into a well, there are many people above throwing stones at you. This kind of situation is throwing stones at someone in a well. Don't worry, no one can see you. That's what I was just saying. So I feel Sakyong Mipham didn't speak much at the time. When His Holiness came out, he would sometimes support him physically, but didn't say much. I didn't have close interactions with him. The one with the beard next to him often accompanied His Holiness. He had great faith in His Holiness. And there's another person here, I think he was the director of the center or something like that. This is the introduction of this photo. Now I'll begin with his recollection. Among American practitioners who received teachings from, this is what I wrote, His Holiness, many of them had also met other highly revered masters and received precious instructions from them. However, many disciples felt the effect that Choje had on them was so special that it remained unforgettable even after so many years. There is a practitioner named Joshua Mulder who recalled this. Look how young he was back then. Then after 30 years, at 71 with this beard, this photo was probably taken last year, everyone was shocked by the presence of His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche when he visited our Sangha. It had been 6 years since our root teacher Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche passed away, so everybody was in a state of lacking inspiration. Actually, many places are like this. When the teacher is alive, everyone is engaged. Then afterwards, fortunately, our Buddhist academy still has some momentum now. It's not like when His Holiness was alive. But everyone still has some faith, including our numbers, our provisions, our conditions in all aspects. This is what we least wanted to see. Back then we also, when His Holiness passed away, we thought the academy might quickly lose its momentum, lose its foundation, lose its morale. When Khenpo Jigme Phuntsok came, it was astounding because his presence was a powerful proclamation that the practice is real. It was as if after His Holiness arrived, he infused them with new vitality. This powerful proclamation validated their practice, as if when they were on their last breath, he immediately granted them a new life. Rinpoche was very definitive and energetic. He was full of spirit, with an extraordinary presence. There was an ancient, profound quality in him. This characteristic, this presence, this quality emanated from within. You could see that he was thoroughly steeped and completely trained in the Dharma. Seeing him was like being in the Himalayan plateau, spacious and surrounded by mountains, as if you had arrived in a different realm. It seems like at that time, because when His Holiness was teaching, some people later said the same thing. The moment His Holiness began teaching, oh, you could see this person was truly accomplished in the Dharma. This is a person's presence, their words, their expressions, they were completely moved. So some Dharma transmission isn't about whether you can speak eloquently. For Khenpos and Khenmos like us, we've basically lived by our tongues our whole lives. We can talk. As for me, if I were to ramble on without looking at books, if I were to just ramble, I could certainly go on for a while. But I try my best to be rigorous. In class, I tried to be as precise as possible with my words. Otherwise, if I just spoke freely, if I made up some stories, I could have you all spinning, making up fairy tales. I wouldn't need to prepare at all. Then I'd tell many fascinating stories. When I was in school before, I often did this with my classmates. When I was in middle school, I'd just make up a story for them. Later, I'd completely forget it myself. Then they'd ask me to tell another one. I'd say, I was just making that up for you. But His Holiness was completely different. That presence he had when teaching the Dharma, wow, this was truly authentic Buddhism, as if transported to another realm. It was like the Himalayas had come to America. He had a very strong presence of solidity, genuineness, pride, and human dignity. What benefited me most was that Choje validated the practice as being real. I started to practice Vajrayogini when I was 27. The Kagyu also practiced Vajrayogini. When we Nyingmapas practiced Guru Yoga, we also practiced Vajrayogini. When I met Khenpo Rinpoche, I was 41. He started at 27. So by then I had been visualizing myself as Vajrayogini for 14 years. Their hearts were truly sincere. They practiced for such a long time. The moment I saw Rinpoche, my entire visualization became real. There was a solid human Vajrayogini sitting in front of me. His way of expressing this is quite special, a solid, concrete reality. He was Vajrayogini in person. When I translated this into Tibetan, Tibetans who read it were also amazed. Wow, their realization is quite high. I translated it into Tibetan. Here I'm translating back and forth. Chinese to Tibetan, Tibetan to Chinese. It wasn't easy to produce this book. Then they realized, so there are such accomplished practitioners in America. Because after he practiced for 14 years, when a truly realized master came, the Yidam he had been practicing completely merged with the teacher. The state of Guru and Yidam being inseparable had already manifested, and he's still alive. These drafts were all written by him in English. Later we organized it to match the Chinese version, with some condensing, then let them review it themselves. He suddenly appeared before me in human form. This sentence has a lot of meaning. Look at how many yidams we've practiced. When a teacher arrives, do you feel they're inseparable from the yidam? Have you had that experience? At some point, when he was granting empowerment, he shouted out, Phat. At the end of our Shurangama mantra, there are also many Phat sounds. When this Phat was shouted, people among the audience saw him levitate off his throne. I personally don't recall this. Perhaps he didn't rise very high, or perhaps I just didn't see it, or perhaps beings perceive differently according to their karma. But when you watch His Holiness saying that Phat in the video, the levitation isn't very clear. But perhaps His Holiness, what he saw wasn't quite the same. That was like a direct experience of reality. It was a direct cutting through of the conceptual mind. His Holiness's Phat, later, at Tashi Choling and several other places, many people had somewhat different experiences with his Phat. This is quite interesting. That was like a direct experience of reality. It was a direct cutting through of the conceptual mind, a teaching that directly severs all discursive thoughts. He vividly demonstrated the ancient tradition from the land of snows in the land of America, and that is truly significant. In this land of America, material prosperity is great, but spiritually, sometimes such teachers are very much needed. So that's his perspective. Okay, we'll stop here.
Bandara Badna Sodargye Bandara Badna Sodargye Bandara Badna Sodargye